something Michael Sullivan reminded me of. It's a year since we got that permission from the Holy Father to say the Old Mass, and kind of segues into an announcement I can make now that this Wednesday we're celebrating the Feast of St. Lambert on the feast day itself. And we're going to celebrate it with a traditional Latin Mass, a solemn high Mass. And if you've never been to one, it's very interesting. And if you have been to one and enjoy it, you're welcome. It'll be at 7:30. A lot of people say, and I write about this in the bulletin, that, well, I don't understand Latin. Well, tell me you understand Picasso. I mean, something can be beautiful without, that kind of is our American revolutionary spirit. If I don't vote on it, it's no good. Well, like I'm always telling you, God has this problem. He thinks he's God. And this is called the Novus Ordo Mass, or the ordinary form of the rite. I call it the new Mass because I'm an old fellow. But one is not better than the other. They emphasize different parts of the mysteries, the mystery of the sacrifice of the Mass. So I would invite you to that Mass this Wednesday at 7:30 to celebrate our patronal feast, and of course there'll be cake and coffee after the celebration. So, also our choir, our parish choir will be singing, and the Latin Schola. So it should really be beautiful. It should be a beautiful Mass. So you're welcome to it. Well, on to the feast. Today is the feast of the triumph of the cross, and what we're really celebrating is a Roman victory in battle. Around 300 A.D., I hope you brought notebooks because there'll be dates, all right? And another thing, before I get rolling, I wish they would translate the Bible into English someday. You know the seraph serpents? What the heck is a seraph serpent? That's a Hebrew word that means fiery, a fiery serpent. If you ever have had a serious snake bite, if you feel like you're burning up, it's a seraph. And the word seraphim, that means fiery angels. That's all it means. So now you know something. If you don't, if you want, you can go to sleep now. If you're up all night cleaning out your basements, you can take a nap. The rest of it is a lot of dates in Roman history, all right? Well, around 300 A.D., 324 sort of, the Roman Emperor Constantine made Christianity legal and began the process by which Christianity became the official religion of the Romans, of the Roman Empire. And his mother, St. Helena, went to the Holy Land and identified the sites associated with the life of Jesus. And her son, the emperor, built beautiful churches over these different places. The Bethlehem, the Church of the Nativity, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. These were originally built by the Emperor Constantine. And a legend sprang up, which may be quite true. How these old stories come about, who knows? But it was told that Helena miraculously found the wood of the cross. And that wood was kept in Jerusalem and venerated. Now, 300 years later, that's longer than the United States has been around. The empire had been Christian for 300 years. In 614, the Persians, who were not Christians, most of them, they were Zoroastrians, followers of the prophet Zarathustra. And their modern descendants are the Parsis, of whom there are very few left in India. Well, these Zoroastrian Persians invaded the Roman Empire, and they captured Jerusalem. And they took these relics of the Holy Cross that were so beloved throughout all of Christianity, and it shook the Christian world to its foundation. And the Roman Emperor Heraclius restructured the army, and he invaded the Persian Empire and pushed back the Persians. And it took a while, but by 630 A.D., a long time, that's 16 years if my math is right, he recovered the relics of the true cross and brought them back to Jerusalem. And that's what we're celebrating, the recovery of those relics. Well, what's such a big deal about that? Well, I think there's a symbolism in it. Because you see, it was probably the Persians, the Iranians, who invented the cross. It was part of their theology Zoroastrians worshipped fire. Still, to this day, Zoroastrians have fire temples. I think there's one in Chicago. And they believed that fire was holy, and to kill a criminal or to dispose of a dead body in fire polluted the fire. They also believed the earth was sacred. So to bury a dead body polluted the earth. They believed the sky was sacred, and that's one of the reasons that the flames and smoke of a body going up polluted the sky. So they actually don't bury their dead. They just sort of put them in little shelves and up above ground. And the cross was a very symbolic torture for people of this belief. Because you see, it meant that the person died hanging between heaven and earth. And they would leave the body on the cross until the birds of the air had consumed all the flesh. It was a very grisly thing. It was a horrible way to die, and it was a grisly reminder to the population, do not cross the authorities. It meant that heaven had rejected you and earth had rejected you. You died suspended between heaven and earth. Now Jesus, according to Jewish law, was a blasphemer. He had made himself God. And the punishment for blasphemy was not crucifixion. It was to be stoned to death. Now, the Romans adopted this Persian practice of crucifixion, and other governments before them had adopted it. And the authorities who wanted to crucify Jesus, they broke the law themselves because they should have stoned him to death if he was guilty of what they had said. But they remembered a verse in the book of Leviticus that says, "Cursed is he who dies hanging on a tree." So they realized that if they could get Jesus crucified, that is, hung on a tree, it would prove he wasn't the Messiah. It would prove he wasn't the Messiah. Why would God curse his own Messiah? So they finagled and they did deals, and they got the Romans to execute Jesus. That way they didn't have to. And it, they thought, would end the issue. Well, it didn't at all. Obviously, we're here. You know, Scott Hahn said something that I'd never thought of when he was here a couple weeks ago. He said that we fail to see the crucifixion as the disciples must have seen it. We think of it as the sacrifice of Calvary. For the disciples, and for that matter for the authorities, those who looked on, it was not a sacrifice. There was no temple. There was no priest. There was no altar. It was an execution. And at best a martyrdom, but most certainly an execution. So how did it become a sacrifice? How did it become a sacrifice? It became a sacrifice because of love. We look at the symbolism of it, that Christ was the victim, the priest, and the altar of sacrifice. That's what we say. But certainly those seeing it didn't think that. It was love that made that horrible curse into a sacrifice. So, in 614 AD, it's as if the Zoroastrians came back to take their cross home with them. They saw it as a curse, but it had become a blessing. It had become a blessing because it had become a sacrifice, and it had become a sacrifice because of love. That's the meaning of today's feast. What the world looks at as a curse, God's Holy Spirit teaches us can become a blessing if it is transformed by love. Because love is always and only what we give away. To love is to die. It is to offer our life. This is at the heart of Catholic faith. This is the heart of our faith. We live in a world and in a culture in which sacrifice has very little meaning.